In John chapter 11, verse 23, Jesus directs Martha and us to look forward, to think of what shall be, and trust in God's purposes. That's what Jesus is saying to Martha right there, and that's what Jesus is saying to you and I. One verse, a long sermon in the sentence, 2 points. I want to talk about, Lazarus's imminent resurrection, because that's the context. But I also want to talk about the future resurrection, my resurrection, your resurrection, and bask in the hope and glory of that. So, first point, Lazarus's imminent resurrection. Jesus' statement in its immediate context is all about Lazarus. Jesus' words were not just a general truth, but a specific promise. Lazarus would be raised that very day, and Martha and Mary didn't know it. Now, we read what Martha says afterwards, and Martha's a little on the confused side, and Jesus brings it down to, I am the resurrection and the life. And it's weird to me that Jesus' statement to Martha in this place of woundedness, his first statement about resurrection, would be so vague, ambiguous. Because Jesus normally is such a great straight shooter. But instead, what he says could be interpreted a whole bunch of different ways. And so here, Jesus, rather than speaking harsh, bold truth, intentionally speaks in a way that allows Martha to wrestle, to struggle with her faith and the hope that it brings. He doesn't specifically say, no problems, I'm going to ruin this funeral. I'm going to raise Lazarus from the dead today. I hope there's enough dinner for him. Whatever. I hope he doesn't smell after being in the grave for 4 days. He doesn't say that. Instead, he stays ambiguous. And that's beautiful to me because he is being vague for her. He is speaking vagueness for her faith and her hope. And I struggled with Jesus' vagueness for the longest time. I liked it when he just bold truth in your face. Being a reader, I read probably 90 books a year. And a lot of them just, novels, fiction, trash. But one of the beautiful things about reading fiction is this idea of subtext, where two guys can be sitting at a diner and they are talking about justice and the legal system, all while there's a bomb under the table. And so they're talking about justice and legal system, but one of them planted the bomb. And you're reading this passage in this novel trying to figure out who did it and will the bomb go off. Subtext. And that's what Jesus is doing here. Jesus is providing some subtext. And you and I read it too fast. And we don't pause and go, what? Especially when we're Martha. Because we would jump to conclusions as well. In this little exchange in John 11:23, where Jesus lays out this vague statement about resurrection, there's a big theological point here. This moment reveals that God, in his holiness and sovereignty and love for us, often allows vagueness, unclarity, the fog of war, if you will, in our trials for the purpose of deepening our faith and our hope in him. If he stepped into the middle of my pain and said, don't worry, in 28 days this is going to happen and it's going to make it all worthwhile, there's no expression of faith, there's no expression of hope, there's no growth opportunities there. He often does that to us, just like he did that to Martha, though not making her wait too much longer. This is another expression of Jesus' ongoing humility. Jesus is a humble guy. He's a humble guy in his words, and he's a humble guy in his actions when Jesus doesn't have to be humble. He intentionally humbles himself as an example for you and I. So we need to learn from the example of Jesus' humility in words and actions. Though Jesus had absolute power to raise the dead, he speaks in this moment with some restraint to allow Martha to process everything, to grow through it. Humility is hard for you and I. The sin of pride leads to the destruction of a great many people in the faith, a great many churches, a great many denominations. Pride comes before the fall. Humility is very consistent with Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, where Jesus did not grasp at his divine rights, but he humbled himself. He consistently lived humbly below his means, if you will. Jesus' humility is an example for us, a perfect example of us. As the Apostle Peter said in his letter, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5, where he commands us to clothe yourselves with humility toward one another. It's a command. We have an opportunity to humble ourselves through obedience or an opportunity to rebel. Clothe yourself with humility. You and I have to decide, will we wear our pride like a chip on our shoulder, demanding our way, demanding we be heard, demanding everything is done according to our will and our timetable? Or do we choose each day, every argument, every problem, to clothe ourselves in humility? This expression in 1 Peter 5:5 is even deeper than that. Clothe yourself with humility. I think, may be wrong, I think Peter intentionally uses the idea of clothing yourselves in humility because he remembers getting his feet washed by Jesus. Because Jesus walked into the room with the disciples all sat down, complained nobody was washing their feet. What does Jesus do? He takes the garment of a slave, wraps it around himself, and then washes the disciples' feet. In other words, Jesus clothed himself in humility by putting on the slave's uniform to wash the disciples' feet. And you know that account. Jesus and Peter, everything Peter said he got wrong until Pentecost. And so they had a little exchange there where Peter didn't want Jesus to wash it. I am confident that Peter learned his lesson that day, having his feet washed by Jesus, and that was such a shock and awe to Peter's ego, that when he says, clothe yourselves with humility, he is thinking about Jesus, taking on the cloth of a slave and washing his own feet. My friends, you and I are given that opportunity every day. Every meeting you go into, every argument with a family member, every time we watch the news, to put on a slave's garment and choose to be humble. Choose to serve rather than be served. We're bad at it, so let me break it down for us. I'm going to give us 5 actions to clothe ourselves in humility like Jesus. That one command in 1 Peter 5:5, I'm going to break it down for us into 5 actions so that we can consistently do it. First one. The first one is embrace servanthood. We want to be served. We do not want to serve. And that is part of the sinful condition. And Jesus served the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Son of God, who had all the glory of divinity, chose to be born as a baby and have somebody change his diapers. He could have demanded that his feet be washed, but he chose to wash the disciples' feet. He could have called angels down to meet every need of his. He did not. You and I need to embrace the high value of serving others in our faith. Christianity is not about you. Our faith of Christianity is about selflessly and sacrificially loving God with our entire being, and selflessly and sacrificially loving others. So that Jesus tells us to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. So let's embrace servanthood. Let's get busy helping other people, my friends. First action. Second action is speaking truth with gentleness. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 says, "A soft answer turns away wrath." I administered a Master's of Counseling program at the university. I wasn't in the program, I didn't teach the program, but I managed the program. And so I got to sit in on the classes for free. If you're a therapist and your client is freaking out and starts yelling and screaming at you, what do? They are told to lower their voice. Lower their voice and speak slowly. If you lower your voice when the toddler is freaking out, you provide calm to their storm. If you lower your voice when your co-employee is dumping their garbage on you for really their mistake, you provide calm. We can speak truth, but we can do it with softness. We can do it with gentleness. We can do it with love. Anybody can declare what smells so bad in this room and start pointing fingers. It requires gentleness and love and compassion to talk about the odor in the room and how to solve it without, making Joey feel bad. Let's speak truth with gentleness. And in our soft answer, we won't hurt their feelings, but we will help them grow in their faith. We can do that well. It takes practice, my friends. So embrace servanthood, and let's speak truth with gentleness, like Jesus did in John 11, verse 23. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, humility. The third way that we can live humility in our lives, clothing ourselves in humility, is by considering others as more significant than ourselves. You can't sit on the couch and go, "Why won't somebody bring me a snack?" Instead, what you should do is, I wonder if the people in this room have the munchies. Instead of demanding that the person in front of you goes the 10 miles over the speed limit that everybody else is doing, Maybe what you should ask yourself is maybe that driver is driving slow because they are struggling. Maybe it's a teenager who's never been on the highway before. Maybe it's a senior citizen who is not driving their age. Thank you for not driving your age. Maybe it's somebody who just came from the eye clinic. They're wearing those black blinder glasses because they can only really see, 10%. We should be grateful they're driving slow instead of honking, swerve around, and then make faces at them. You've done it, right? Huh? Who's doing all that? Let's consider other people's needs and wants. I was driving in a car with an ex-police officer who was a prison guard, and we pulled up to the traffic light, and the car next to us, we're going the same way straight, the car next to us stopped like at my back bumper and just left all that space open. My passenger, such a good guy, went on a tirade on how those people frustrate him when he's behind them. Move forward so people can do. And he just went on this tirade. And I did number 2 and number 3. I listened to him speak. And then when he was done, I said, maybe they've been in an accident where somebody turned and hit them when they were parked in the first spot. They were parked up against the light, some car turning, rammed them head on. And so now they park back to provide a little room. Maybe they've gunned it and almost hit a child. Maybe this is a good thing they're parking further back. He sat in silence, and then he's like, words that are never spoken. John, you're right. Or at least not spoken enough. I don't know. You judge that. Right? Speak truth with gentleness. Consider others more significant. Wave people in as they're using blinkers. Let them get in front of you. You don't know what kind of hurry they're in. Number 4, yield personal rights for the sake of love. I am due this. How dare you trample on what I am owed? Tends to be our entire outlook. Not Jesus-like, not New Testament, not Christianity. Christianity is turn the other cheek. Christianity is carry the weight, double the distance. Christianity is give until it hurts. Christianity is saying, I don't have any rights that aren't given by God. And it's God's job to protect my rights. We just don't live that truth. But that's clothing ourselves in humility, my friends. How about Psalm chapter 37, verse 7? The 5th way that we can clothe ourselves is trusting in God. Trust in God's timing, trust in God's plan, trust in God's will, instead of demanding immediate answers. We don't like to be patient. We don't like to long suffer. We want it now. But God may be doing something different. So let's humble ourselves before the throne of God and realize it's not our will, our timing, our plan, us. But instead, my friends, it's God, 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 and we can do it. We can. 5 ways that we can clothe ourselves. Here we have Martha dealing with faith and patience. Martha is a model of sincerity, but struggling faith. We can relate to that. She believes in the final resurrection, but she struggles with the present uncertainty. She's at a funeral of her brother. Jesus cultivates patience in her, teaching that faith is not just about the future, but it's also about trusting God in the now and in the future. faith and patience go hand in hand. Faith and patience. They're practically partners. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 12, imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. Faith and patience. Let's imitate those. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 23 talks about the fruit of the Spirit, that is patience. You cultivate the fruit of the Spirit by walking and living with God. We, my friends, need to be humble, hopeful, but we also need to be patient in our faith. Let me give us 5 practical actions for living faith and patience. 5 ways we can live faith and patience. First, waiting on God's promises without wavering. Man, the Bible is full of examples of people who waited beyond my long suffering. Psalm 27, verse 14, a psalm of worship says, wait for the Lord. Be strong, take heart, and wait for the Lord. I appreciate those being connected. Because when I have to wait for the Lord, I need divine strength. And I need Him to increase the attention of my heart so that I can, in fact, wait on the Lord. We need to stay constant. We need to persevere. We need to be bold examples of patience, and I am not. And I need to do it. How about praying in patience? We need to pray persistently despite delays. I know some of us have been praying for the same lost person, needing the same miracle in our family, needing a miracle in Utah, needing a big prayer request. And we are not to do one and done. We're to pray and pray and pray and pray and pray until God delivers it. We can be the widow bothering the judge, and the judge will do it. Keep praying for that prayer request. Add on to it. Our persistence is biblical in prayer. Faith and patience. It's a beautiful thing. Number 3, speaking words of faith rather than doubt. Mark chapter 11, verse 23. Jesus said, truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go, throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Pray in faith. Pray big, and God will answer. It may require patience. It may require boldness. It may require blind confidence. But that's the kind of prayers that grow our faith and really honor and please God. It's a beautiful thing, my friends. The 4th one is all about others. The 4th one is about encouraging others when they are waiting, when the other person needs patience, when the other person is long-suffering. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 24 and Hebrews chapter 11. John 11. See, that's what I do. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Let's stimulate and encourage one another in faith while we each wait and long suffer and diligently pray, my friends. The last idea is remembering past faithfulness to fuel the endurance. Too often, my friends, we remember the pain, the wound, the bad times, and we don't build monuments to God's faithfulness, to God's integrity, to God's miracles, to God's goodness, to God's answered prayers of ours. we need to remember the past because it'll add fuel to what we're going through now. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 21 and 23. Yet I call this to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the loving devotion of the Lord, we are not consumed, for his mercies never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. His past, God has been faithful. His devotion is true. Therefore, every morning we can be renewed because God is good, my friends. Lazarus's resurrection was imminent. Let's take a moment and talk about our future resurrection. Because Jesus' words are also an eternal promise to all who believe. So while he's talking to Martha about Lazarus, he's also talking to me about the ones I have lost and that I'm still grieving for. And it offers me the hope of my own resurrection. Though spoken in the immediate context of Lazarus, Jesus' words extend to all of us believers, offering us hope. We can have, my friends, comfort in the face of death. Jesus' words are for those who believe in Jesus. So the resurrection is not just this idea. It's not a myth. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a lie. The resurrection is a powerful, profound, theological truth, biblical truth, and personal reality that we need to be living. We need to be living the truth of our future resurrection. How would our future resurrection impact us and provide practical comfort and hope when we suffer? Practical comfort when facing grief and loss. Death, my friends, is not the end, but only a transition. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and 14 says, we do not grieve as those who have no hope. We don't weep for the saint who has died. Because when we bury godly friends and family, we hold fast to the certainty of the resurrection. Death has been defeated. There are 3 biblical examples of resurrection faith. Abraham in Genesis 22, and it's stated in Hebrews 11. That 11 is going to get me in trouble later, I'm sure. Abraham believed that if Isaac died, if he sacrificed Isaac on the altar, God would raise him from the dead. Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac on the altar because Abraham believed in the resurrection. How powerful is that? How about in the prophets? Ezekiel's valley of dry bones, where the dry bones rise from the dead. This is a vision of national and spiritual restoration. It definitely has the echo, the theme, the taste of resurrection hope, the valley of dry bones. And then, of course, Jesus' miracles. I say it all the time, don't I? Jesus ruins every funeral he comes to. He even had the audacity to ruin his own funeral. So Lazarus is just like, the one we get the most attention for. He has come upon a son that was dead, going off to be buried, raises him from the dead. He came across a daughter who had been raised him from the dead. Now his friend Lazarus is going to raise him from the dead. When Jesus was dying on the cross, the tombs of Jerusalem shook and the dead rose. And then, of course, when the ladies go to Jesus' tomb to finish out the funeral rites that they couldn't finish because of the Sabbath, he went missing. Jesus' miracles of resurrection, right? We are more than flesh and blood. We are more than animals. We have a soul. We have a spirit. We are made in the image of God. The soul at death is not lost. It simply goes before. Philippians chapter 1, verse 23, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. The body, though buried or cremated or whatever, eaten by the shark, is only laid aside temporarily. It will rise again in a resurrected, glorified body that we don't know anything about. 7 implications of being soul, spirit, with life after death. What are the implications of the fact that you and I are spiritual beings? Death is not annihilation. The spirit continues to exist. We are, for all impracticable purposes, immortal. 2, believers immediately enter God's presence. Absent from the body, present with the Lord. So the moment of death, you go before the throne of God. Your soul, your spirit goes there. Number 3, the body will be raised, not replaced. It's a glorified, resurrected body. Jesus had a glorified, resurrected body that still bore like his wounds, but he could also pass through walls. He could disguise himself. He could reveal himself. All kinds of stuff we just don't understand, but I'm looking forward to it. Mostly walking through walls. I think that would be shortcuts for walking, right? You know, none of that going through the maze to get to the kitchen. You could just, yeah. Number 4, resurrection is physical, not just spiritual. Jesus had a resurrected body, and he is our example, my friends. You and I will have a resurrected body with all of that unknown and mystery. Some of us think we'll be tall. Some of us think we'll be short. Some of us think we'll be thin. Some of us think we'll have hair. Some of us think we'll be bald. I have no idea what it'll be. I'm hoping that there will be a cure for gray hair in the resurrected body just because I went gray at 21. I blame my children. Anyway, number 5, judgment follows death. Absent from the body, present with the Lord, judgment. Those who believe in Jesus Christ are in heaven. Those who have rejected Jesus Christ go to Hades, hell. They go to jail after death. Judgment follows death, and that ought to motivate us, my friends. Motivate us. Number 6, the new creation will unite heaven and earth. Revelation chapter 21 is weird. Revelation chapter 21 is weird because it talks about a new heaven and a new earth, where the scars of sin and the fall of Adam are eliminated. It'll all be new. There'll be a recreation where the spiritual and the physical will somehow merge together. It'll be beautiful. Number 7. My friends, you cannot lose your salvation by somebody taking it away from you. Your eternal destiny in heaven, in the presence of God, and with the resurrection, having a resurrected body, does not depend on you or your circumstances or your struggles. It wholly depends on Jesus Christ. We have assurance of salvation, hope of resurrection, and eternal life, not because of you or me, but because of Jesus. Salvation is a gift. Eternal destiny is a gift from God. Jesus is the giver of that gift, and so it all depends on him. And he is holy, he is good, he is faithful, and he could purchase our salvation with his death and blood on the cross, my friends. It's a beautiful thing. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. There are 4 biblical examples for the continuity of life after death, because that's hard for us to think about. We make up stuff like ghosts and poltergeists and all of that weird TV shows that say they're reality shows by going through spooky houses, but they aren't reality shows. But the Bible's got 4 big ones. Enoch, who walked with God and was no more. Elijah, who is carried to heaven without dying by being picked up by a flaming chariot. That's first-class transportation. No, it's not aliens. That's not an X-File thing. That's a spiritual thing. Beautiful. How about in 1 Samuel when the witch of Endor calls forth Samuel's ghost, and when Samuel's ghost appears for King Saul, the witch freaks out because she wasn't expecting anything to happen? So Samuel's ghost makes an appearance in 1 Samuel 23. His spirit, his soul. And he gets all ticked off. I love that. Revelation chapter 1, verse 18 declares the ultimate proof of resurrection is, in fact, Jesus. Jesus' resurrection is huge. Jesus' promise about the resurrection, my friends, speaks in a very powerful way to you and I personally. Imagine Jesus speaking these words over our own loved ones. You're at your dad's funeral, and Jesus says, your father will rise again. Or you're at your mother's funeral. The last time I went home to Tennessee was for my mom's funeral. There's no reason to go back now. Can you imagine Jesus saying to me at my mother's funeral, your mother will rise again? Some of you have buried children, which is a mountainous weight that crushes an awful lot of people. And I'm proud of you for how you endured it. Can you imagine burying your child and Jesus saying, your child will rise again? Because that's what he says when a believer in Jesus Christ faces death of another believer in Jesus Christ. We just don't really put hands and feet to that idea. We don't make it part of how we live. And God's written word, inspired in all its parts, God-breathed, is certainly for good theology, but it's about application. So let me give us 5 practical ways that the future of our resurrection can shape our lives today. 5 practical ways that the future can shape our lives today. Number 1, living with hope instead of fear. You have no reason to be afraid of death. To be afraid of death is the opposite of faith. I don't think we ought to rush out and play in traffic in any kind of way. We should be safe. But we should have this overwhelming hope when facing death. An overwhelming hope when facing difficulty. Regardless of what we're going through, this too shall pass. And it's going to get better. And if the worst thing that our enemies in humanity can do is kill us, brother, bring it on. You don't threaten the martyrs with promotion, right? Let's have hope instead of fear, my friends. Number 2, let's prioritize eternal heavenly things over earthly stuff. Our entire focus is on work and keeping up with the Joneses. I'm sorry if your last name is Jones. Getting the bigger, better, larger, more, whatever. Instead of focusing in on the things that really matter. Because all that stuff, the day after you retire, somebody else will do your job and they will probably do your job better than you. The day after you have been buried in the ground, your children are going to throw out or fight over all of your garbage. And you've spent a life accumulating an 88-inch TV that is going to be sold to somebody on Facebook for $30. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 and 20, do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasure in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. Do good for the honor and glory of God, my friends, instead of wasting your time on all the garbage. Number 3, man, we can endure hardships with an eternal perspective. Cancer diagnosis, some kind of terminal, a cancer diagnosis or a terminal to your spouse or to your child, and having to walk through that pain and suffering that is long-term and goes on 10 times longer than it should from our perspective. What can guide us during that valley of the shadow of death is keeping our eyes on the hope this too shall pass, and heaven and the resurrection is our future. That can be our motivation. That can be our guiding light. That can be the fuel behind us keeping our head up in the weight of all of that pain, my friends. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17 puts it this way: for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Momentary troubles, light. Number 4, man, if we believed in the reality of life after death in heaven or in hell, we would take the lost person's rejection of Jesus or ignorance of Jesus far more seriously, my friends. We would be fueled to share the gift of hope and salvation and God's love. We wouldn't have to be manipulated into sharing our faith. We wouldn't have to be living with the guilt of having not shared our faith. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58 says this: therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not vain. Get busy serving the Lord. Get busy sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ and your story with Jesus to others, because the person you're sharing it with is on the highway to hell. And you alone know the exit to the stairway to heaven. Offer the stairway to heaven to the lost person, my friends. That's putting hands and feet to the reality of resurrection. Let's share our hope, my friends. The hope given to us in Jesus. Number 5, living holy lives in expectation of Jesus' return. Because it's death, then judgment. 1 John chapter 3, verses 2 through 3 says, beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him just as he is. And everyone who has this hope of resurrection, set on him, Jesus, purifies himself just as he is pure. Let the hope of the resurrection cause you and I to double down on our purity, double down on our innocence, commit ourselves to godliness in action and lifestyle, holiness in speech, holiness and purity in thought, my friends. Let it fuel our godliness, in other words. The whole idea is we're supposed to be looking forward with confidence. My friends, Jesus calls us to think forward, to anticipate what God will do resurrection. God's purpose brings us real comfort if we believe in him, both in our present trials and in our future hope, my friends. We can say, because Jesus lives, we too shall live.